Laser welders are freaking wild. Today, I am putting the brand new xTool MetalFab head to head against my traditional setup, a Lincoln MIG welder and a Miller plasma cutter to see which one is faster, cleaner, and easier. The big promise of these new machines is that they remove the steep learning curve of traditional metalworking tools. Until now, laser welding and laser cutting were technologies reserved for large fabrication shops. But I am not ready to sell my MIG welder just yet, and I'll explain why. I also got my hands on the competing laser welder and cutter, and we'll see how they compare. Can a single machine really function as an entire fabrication shop and save time, space, and frustration? We're about to find out, and this video is brought to us by Squarespace. So for the first half of the video, we are going to compare the xTool MetalFab to traditional machines. And then the second half of the video, we're going to put it to the test and make an entire project using all the capabilities of this. So currently I have a MIG welder, a plasma cutter, a plasma table, a bench grinder, angle grinders, and a metal cutting circular saw. And this is supposed to replace all of them. That is crazy. This thing can clean, cut, and weld. And there's also a CNC part that we're gonna save for later. If you like what you see in this video, I'll provide a link to the MetalFab down in the description, which it's currently on sale, and you can save yourself up to 600 bucks. So we're gonna start with cutting. Plasma cutting versus laser cutting. Handheld. So with a traditional plasma cutter, you need an air compressor that is big enough, has enough duty cycles, whatever the heck that is, and can keep up with it. You don't need a full welding helmet, but you do need at least specialized glasses. I'm going to go ahead and use my welding helmet. You want to cover up your skin and have gloves. So I am going to put the ground clamp on my board here. I am going to sexy myself up and... Did I call it a board? I am going to put the ground clamp on. I'm a woodworker. I'm not a metal worker. You're going to find that out real quick. The thing with the plasma cutter is, for this particular one, you need to hold it about 3 millimeters above the surface. You can get little, they look like little training wheels that it holds it above the surface perfectly. Let's give this a shot here. The two things that I want to show with the plasma cutter is the size of the kerf here, which is just a little bit over 2 millimeters, and the dross on the back. That's the molten steel on the bottom side of the cuts. And we're going to compare it to the laser in a little bit. And before we play with the laser, I'm going to use the same plasma cutter to cut aluminum and stainless steel. Two things I have never done with my plasma cutter. It did successfully cut the aluminum and stainless steel. Now, I could have probably set my power settings a little bit different for a cleaner cut, but aluminum is generally a very messy cut with plasma. And then the stainless steel, also pretty darn messy, but that might be because my setting wasn't dialed in perfectly. And now the xTool, check this out. This guy is made for lasers. You can also just use the laser glasses if you need to, but get the right glasses. This time I'm gonna throw a little straight edge on here and follow that. It is absolutely wild and how fast it is and how tiny the kerf is, plus hardly any dross whatsoever on the back side. It is absolutely, it's like magic every single time I use it. I'm gonna just do one more because it's so fun. Look at that. That is just crazy clean. This is 2 millimeter carbon steel. It can do much thicker than this. This is the thickest metal that I have. It is 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch, and that cut through perfectly fine. Like it can obviously handle thicker than 6 millimeters. Magic. The MetalFab makes handheld metal cutting easier and cleaner than traditional plasma cutting. Instead of struggling to hold the torch tip the perfect distance above the MetalFab's cutting head rides smoothly right on the workpiece, keeping the laser perfectly focused at all times. This makes it much easier to follow a template. The result is a precise, very narrow curve with minimal dross. no warping, and when you dial in the perfect settings and speed, edges are clean enough to go straight to assembly with no grinding required. This is how I'll be breaking down larger sheets from now on. In the past, I relied on an angle grinder or a metal cutting circular saw. It blows my mind every single time. The screen takes all the guesswork out of your settings, so we can go to cuts, we choose our thickness, which is 2 millimeters, and carbon steel, and we are good to go. You can override and go into advanced mode and change all the settings if you need to, but I have been sticking with the default settings. When it comes to laser cutting, the type of gas you use makes a big difference. Nitrogen is the most popular choice because it gives you clean, shiny cuts with no oxidation, especially on stainless steel and aluminum. Argon is slower and more expensive, but it's excellent for specialty metals like titanium and for very high quality edges. Compressed air is the budget-friendly option. It works well for mild steel and general cutting, but you'll see more oxidation and a rougher edge compared to nitrogen or argon. The choice really depends on whether you're prioritizing speed, cost, or edge quality. I don't mind a little cleanup to save money, so when cutting, I always use compressed air. And the cleanup isn't nearly as bad as when you're using a plasma cutter. This is the xTool air compressor, which you can control the pressure, and then it also has the air dryer because you want clean, dry air, otherwise it can hurt your cut. The kerf cut on this is insanely tiny, and on the stainless steel, I started to go really fast at the end, and it was cutting all the way through. So I think this whole time, I have been going way too slow. So in aluminum, this is the dross that we got with the plasma cutter, which is pretty darn messy and a lot of cleanup. And then this is the dross that we got with the laser cutter. It's not perfect, but that's a very quick cleanup. You can get a perfect cut, but I chose to use compressed air instead of gas to save some money. And that's not gonna take long to clean up at all. And then that's the laser cut on the stainless steel, which is really stupid clean. No cleanup at all. And then that's the plasma. That is just a messy, nasty looking cut. And then this is the carbon steel. I cut this side using the straight edge, and then I cut this side freehand. And then there is the dross on the back side with the default settings using compressed air. And there's the plasma cut steel for comparison. A lot of cleanup on the bottom there. I have a container of play sand here because I have been burning the floor using the handheld laser cutter. Even though it's, you know, a good 4 feet away, it still burns. Also, I can throw my hot pieces in there to cool down. You can also cut brass as well, which you can't do with the plasma cutter, but I'm gonna save that for later. And up next, we're going to do some welding, and I'm gonna start with the traditional welder, which is a Lincoln 210 MIG. I've gone ahead and angle grinded everything nice and clean. I forgot to turn the gas on, so that was absolutely terrible. I'm a little out of practice, but it's welded. Good enough for now. This machine can technically weld aluminum, but you need more equipment that I don't have, some sort of aluminum welding spool. Also, welding aluminum is notoriously hard. It's a skill and you just don't get it the first time. That's all I'm gonna use this guy for, so let me show you the MetalFab. To switch this guy out from laser to welding, I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna disconnect the air hose and connect our gas hose. I'm using argon. And then turn it back on and select weld from the menu. I almost forgot, you gotta swap out the tips. So we remove the cutting tip and put in the welding tip, lock that down, and then we have to add our wire feeder. So I put that on there, lock that down, that goes in there. Now we're set up for welding. Unlike my MIG welder, I can move the wire backwards as well, so I don't have to keep cutting the tip every single time. The first time I welded with the MetalFab, I thought I was doing something wrong because the filler was so small. But it turns out that's one of the many differences to traditional welding. The seam is much smaller and cleaner, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's weaker. Laser welding has a lot more penetration than MIG welding. I've learned this the hard way because I have welded my test pieces right to my table. With the xTool laser welder, you can weld with or without wire. Use wire when you need to fill a gap or add strength or build up the material, especially on thicker parts. For tight, well-prepared joints or thin sheets, you can skip wire altogether and do autogenous welding, which just fuses the base metal. When you do use wire, you need to match it to your material. Stainless steel wire for stainless steel, solid iron wire for carbon or galvanized steel, tin brass wire for brass, and aluminum wire for aluminum. The welder supports wire sizes from 0.8 to 1.6 millimeters and even comes with a roll of 1 millimeter stainless wire to get you started. When you start welding with the xTool laser welder, the clamp on the sensing cable must be attached to your workpiece and the nozzle itself must be touching the metal. That contact closes a safety circuit, so once you press both the grip sensor and the trigger, the laser starts instantly while the wire feeds in. The reaction from the weld pool pushes the gun back automatically, so you just guide it along the seam. It's so weird the first time you weld because the gun pushes back automatically. And so you don't even need to control your speed. You just let the gun do it for you. It's kind of weird and awesome. For the very first weld, I did clean it before welding. And then the rest of them, I just wanted to move along. And I don't have that much mill scale or rust, and it seemed to do perfectly fine. And then after all of that, I used the laser to clean up the weld. So there's no grinding with an angle grinder after you're done. The filler is so small and the laser cleans it up for you. The whole thing is freaking magic. I would say in most cases when I'm doing carbon steel, I won't even clean it up. There's no need. It's just a beautiful weld right off the bat. That right there, that's the laser carbon steel weld. And then there is the MIG. Now, that is a really, really bad technique, and that is on me. It's kind of embarrassing, but you can see there's a lot more filler material and there's a lot more cleanup afterwards. That is phenomenal. There's the bottom. You can see the penetration, and then there's the weld. That's pretty good. It's bending before it'll break. So that's a good weld. That's my first time ever welding aluminum, and it's freaking beautiful. I know a lot of you are going to be asking for a strength test, and although I don't have a very scientific way of doing so, I think this is going to give you a pretty good idea of how strong a laser weld is. So I took some 3/8 inch flat bar and cleaned both pieces with the laser and cut off the pieces to be welded, also using the laser. On the first piece, I welded a 90-degree joint with the MIG welder, and I think I totally redeemed myself with this pretty decent MIG weld right here. And then I did the exact same thing on the other piece, except this time with the laser. And as you can see side by side, the difference in filler material. I'm going to try to break the weld with my custom-made weld breaking tool. So I'm starting off with the MIG weld. I started to bend it with my custom-made tool, and I could only get so far, so I decided to finish it off with a hammer. And as I thought, it did not break. And now the same test with the laser weld, and right away it bent my custom-made tool, so I decided to do the rest with the hammer, and again, I could not get it to break. This is 3/8 inch steel, and the metal was bending before the weld would break. So again, with the laser, you get a lot less filler material, but you get more penetration. Like you can even see on the back, this is the laser cut one, and you can see the penetration on the back, where you don't see it as much with the MIG weld. And there's no cleanup with the laser weld. It just looks better. Of course, you can use the laser cleaning to clean your welds pre and post welding, but you can also use it to clean old rusty tools. I just want to get to my favorite part about this whole thing, and that is the CNC. I'm going to use the same laser gun, put on the special tip, lock that down. This gets threaded into the machine, clamp that down, and then the cable gets locked into place in 3 different spots. The bottom has a tray of sand for things to fall into. It's got these removable slats that you can position anywhere on the bed here. This is very well thought out. So your sheet slides in to this side, lift up that clamp, lock that down. This comes in, rides on rails, goes on there, locks that down. This is solid in place. And then the piece, if it falls through, lands in the sand. There's a camera in the machine that can see exactly what we want. We can go in, we can choose the material. It's got a bunch of default settings already in there. I can choose 2mm aluminum, confirm. I imported my artwork into the software. I got my settings all set. So now I can just go and hit process. It's still hot, still a little hot. That's the default setting. There is no dross and no cleanup on the back whatsoever. That's stainless steel, can cut carbon, can cut aluminum, can cut brass. The software by xTool for this machine is the exact same piece of software for their CO2 laser. I've said many times that xTool makes the best digital CNC software out there. I've got a lot of digital tools and some of the software just looks like it was made for Windows 95 and it's just not intuitive and not easy to use. Unlike any other machine that I am aware of, the software works on iOS, iPad OS, Mac OS, Android OS, and Windows. It doesn't matter what computer you have, this will work with it. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I also got my hands on the competition laser welder cutter and cleaner. I backed the Kickstarter for the XLaserLAB X1 Pro by Photonics. The XLaserLAB is a good all-around laser welder, cutter, and cleaner, but at 700 watts, it just can't match my 1200 watt MetalFab. The extra power really pays off on thicker material. Now, the XLaserLAB does have a CNC data port, but from what I have seen in the Facebook group, it's not exactly plug and play. You have to source or build your own CNC, and the software won't integrate directly. The MetalFab CNC, on the other hand, has a built-in camera, integrates seamlessly, and just feels smarter. The gun layout is more ergonomic, wire changes are tool-free and much faster. On the XLaserLAB, the extra rollers for different wire sizes are placed in a really inconvenient spot. Bottom line is, MetalFab is just faster, easier, and more enjoyable to use. You can tell a lot more thought went into its design, screen interface, and overall user experience. I do have some final thoughts, and I also want to talk about why I'm not going to sell my MIG welder just yet, but I'm done testing. I want to make an actual project with all the capabilities of this. So I'll get to my final thoughts afterwards, but right now, let's make an outdoor patio table. This started off as me just playing around in Fusion, trying to learn how the sheet metal design space works. Within this environment, you basically start off with flat stock and you bend it and cut it into the shapes that you want. And when you're all done, you can export everything out as a flat file, which is perfect for the MetalFab. So I used a handheld laser cutter to break down a large sheet of 15 gauge sheet metal to fit into the CNC. And while this is cutting out, I'd like to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace for well over 10 years. It simplifies my life, it simplifies my business, and I used to be a web developer for a living. I know what it takes to make a good website, and Squarespace checks all those boxes. And now, if you're setting up a brand new website, Squarespace makes it insanely easy. You're just gonna answer a few questions, and while doing so, Squarespace is going to make your website in the background. And then you just replace the photos and text with your photos and text. Squarespace templates are absolutely beautiful. I'm using one of their default templates myself. And just because you're using a template doesn't mean you can't make it look like yours. You can go in and you can modify colors, you can rearrange things, all by dragging and dropping. And when you're done, your website is going to look beautiful on phones, tablets, and desktop because it's going to reformat itself to fit those screens. I know a lot of you are crafters and makers and woodworkers and metalworkers and artists, and you need a portfolio for your stuff. And you can do so easily with their image gallery. Setting up a store is a breeze. And if you want to take payments in person, you can do so with the Squarespace app. So all of your income is coming into one central place. Visit squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, visit squarespace.com/makesomething for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for making these videos possible. A few months ago, I bought this metal bending brake on Amazon. It was the smallest sheet metal brake I could find that could bend up to 15 gauge without hydraulics. I don't have any more space in here, so I couldn't purchase anything that would take up more footprint because Kelly likes to park her car in here. I guess some people use garages as a place to keep their vehicles. I don't get it. Anyways, this is my first time ever bending metal with a brake, and it was very satisfying and rewarding. I've got big plans for this guy that you'll see in some future videos. Once all 4 legs were made, I then needed to make a frame that they would attach to, and this would also hold the tabletop. And like I mentioned before, I'm out of space, so I'm working on the floor like an animal. Everything is welded together with the MetalFab, and being able to select a preset on the machine made this process go extremely fast. Then everything gets welded together, even though I made tabs for the legs so they could be removable. I decided to commit to this design, plus welding is fun and satisfying. The tabletop is made out of engineered wood that is used for decks, since this table is going to be for the outdoors. I won't have to worry about finish and weathering over time. Yes, this machine is a huge investment, but it's the first time a pro-level metal laser has been within reach for small shops and serious makers. The real question is, would you rather pay somebody else to prototype your ideas or do it yourself anytime, right in your own space? That's who this is made for. For me, it's pure magic. I'm mostly a woodworker, so being able to cut and weld metal this cleanly and easily still blows my mind. It's fast, quiet, and clean, and there's no steep learning curve. Plus, the laser arc is easier on the eyes than MIG, so you can actually see what's happening as you weld. I will be selling my plasma cutter because I just don't need it anymore. Plus, the laser handles thin sheet metal without blow through or warping that you get from plasma cutting. On the other hand, I am keeping my MIG welder. The laser gives you strong, deep welds, but it doesn't add filler like MIG. So for bridging gaps or heavy repairs, the MIG still wins. But I don't see myself using it anytime soon. Bottom line is, this machine opens up so many new possibilities. It's cleaner, more precise, and more accessible than anything I've used in metal fabrication. I've also just been informed that the xTool will be adding the ability to engrave into metal very soon, meaning you'll be able to cut, weld, remove rust, and engrave all in one machine. I'll have links to it down below, which it's currently on sale, and you can save yourself up to $600. That is gonna wrap it up. As always, be safe, have fun, stay passionate, and make something. I need to get a hat or some sunscreen. Look at that, that came out so cool. I'm actually thinking about selling these legs. We'll see.